It's elementary, my dear Watson, for I may be dead, or am I? Today on the Murder, She Wrote podcast. Hello guys, it's finally here. My favorite show, and I have it completely on DVD, all 12 seasons, and I am so excited. I'm on disc 4. I wanted to watch a little bit of it before I decided to do this, so I'm really excited. Before we get started with The Death of Sherlock Holmes, the pilot movie, let me give you a little background on the show that you might not have known. Way back when, in 1984, CBS was worried that there was nothing to watch on Sunday nights. I know, it seems completely bonkers now, because we all know that there's nothing to watch on Sunday nights. And out of desperation, they ran an Agatha Christie movie. To their surprise, the ratings were high. So, thinking it was a fluke, they decided to run it again. And the same thing happened. So they decided they needed to have a mystery series, kind of like an Agatha Christie movie, like the character of Miss Mabel, which Angela Lansbury had starred in The Mirror Cracked with Elizabeth Taylor, as a weekly series, but wasn't sure they could get the rights to the character of Miss Mabel. So, creators Peter S. Fisher and Richard Levinson had, I hope I said that right, I'm sorry, had created Murder, She Wrote, about a woman detective who is a mystery writer. But before Miss Angela Lansbury was cast, the production had another idea. The producers at CBS had another idea, to cast Jean Stapleton in the role, who had played the role of Edith Bunker on All in the Family. What most people don't know about Jean Stapleton was she was a character actress. She would take a character and put her heart and soul into that character, including committing to that Edith was a bad singer in the opening of All in the Family. Yep, that's called acting, folks. Jean Stapleton had a beautiful voice and had a long career on Broadway. Most people don't know that. When she was approached for Murder, She Wrote, she declined because she didn't want to commit to another series, because she felt that she belonged on Broadway. Because she had been typecast because of playing the role of Edith Bunker. And they had just killed off the character of Edith Bunker because they had spun All in the Family off to Archie Bunker's place where Archie had bought a bar. And Jean Stapleton didn't think that Archie was the kind of person that would buy a bar. And seeing as many episodes of All in the Family as I have, she's right. So Peter had in mind Angela Lansbury. But the network wasn't so sure. Angela Lansbury had been acting in film since she was 16 years old. Her first film was Gaslight, and she got an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress. Her next film was The Picture of Dorian Gray, and she also got an Oscar nomination for that too. Sorry about my chair. But MGM had signed her, but wasn't giving her challenging roles and didn't know what to do with her. They cast her in a musical with Judy Garland called The Harvey Girls. But they decided to dub her voice because they said that she did not sound like a saloon girl. So her voice was dubbed, and also her career hit a setback because she played the villain in the film and was mean to Judy Garland, and America didn't like that at the time. They didn't like that Angela Lansbury picked on Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. Eventually, her film career fizzled out, and not a lot of roles were coming towards her, so she decided her hand on Broadway. She didn't succeed, though, until her breakout role in Mame in 1968. Mame was based on the Broadway play Anti-Mame, which was in turn turned into a movie that starred Rosalind Russell, who got an Academy Award for her role. When Jerry Herman, had decided to compose it and turn it into a musical, he approached Rosalind Russell about it, but she declined, stating that they had done everything they possibly could do with the character and that there was no reason to have it be a musical. So Angela Lansbury was cast in the role of Mame Dennison, an unorthodox aunt who raises her nephew during the Great Depression and has a different way of life than what he's been grown accustomed to. This also introduced her to lifelong friend and future Golden Girls star Bea Arthur. I know for a fact that Angela Lansbury never guest starred on the Golden Girls, and I'm hoping there may be a secret episode somewhere where Bea Arthur guest starred on Murder, She Wrote, but I honestly don't think that she did, which is sad. Bea Arthur played the role of Vera Charles, and her and Angela Lansbury both got Tony Awards for their roles. Angela Lansbury got a total of 4 Tony Awards for 4 different musicals, one of them being playing the original Mrs. Lovett on Broadway in Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street, as well as for Gypsy, playing the role of Mama Rose on a tour in London as well as in the US. By the time the 1980s rolled around, Angela Lansbury wasn't very successful on Broadway anymore. She had a few roles, but she wanted to try television. And not a lot of good offers came her way, and she couldn't believe that all that time entertaining folks on Broadway and this is all she got. It boiled down to 2 different scripts, Murder, She Wrote, and a Norman Lear, who created All in the Family, it all comes full circle, sitcom. She decided to go to both parties and audition for both projects, but she was drawn to Murder, She Wrote more so than the Norman Lear sitcom. She ended up choosing Murder, She Wrote, and the rest is history. But CBS executives weren't so keen on the idea of casting Angela Lansbury because not a lot of people knew who she was. So they filmed an unaired TV pilot where Jessica Fletcher is trying to come up with a reasonable explanation as to how her main character in her book gets killed. There's even a point where she takes a phone cord and ties it into a noose, which was not scripted. This unaired pilot allowed them to greenlit the pilot movie, which aired on September 30th, 1984, called The Murder of Sherlock Holmes, which was what my entry was about, which I hope you enjoyed that. As often the practice of television back then, whenever a new series would come about, instead of throwing it into the wings and letting it see if it would garner, get ratings or whatever like they do now, they did a pilot movie, a TV movie of the week, as they called it. And they did this with several successful shows like Little House on the Prairie, The Waltons, Baywatch, and several other shows that were not so lucky. And if the TV movie of the week did not have enough ratings, then they just chalked it off as a TV movie of the week. No harm, no foul. But lucky for us, when The Murder of Sherlock Holmes premiered on September 30th, 1984, it was a rating success, and Murder, She Wrote was greenlit for her first season and stayed on the air for a grand total of 12 years and is one of the longest running mystery series to feature a woman in the role of the detective. So let's dive into the pilot movie of Murder, She Wrote, The Murder of Sherlock Holmes. Mr. Watson. My dear Watson. Anyway, we open with a woman who is coming down the stairs, presumably looking for her husband and or boyfriend. It's really spooky and scary. We feel like we're in a horror movie. And when she opens the door to see if he's outside, we see a man who's dressed in black with an axe. And she screams, and we find out we're watching a play. It turns out that Jessica Fletcher and her two random friends, who we never see again, whose names we don't even know, are there to be on the snack committee that basically gives people food before the play starts and during intermission. And Jessica tells the stunned director that she figured out who the killer is. The uncle did it. But this has no bearing whatsoever on the plot, so we're not going to spend too much time on this. After having various establishing shots of Cabot Cove and Jessica running around in the opening credits, and it was nice to see this in its entirety. Normally in syndication, this is an hour and 34 minutes because it's a movie, but in syndication, it's broke up into two different parts. When it originally aired, it was a movie. So it's nice to see this in its entirety without commercials. Anyway, Jessica goes into her house and she gets a phone call from her nephew Grady Fletcher, played by Michael Horton, who will be a recurring character throughout Murder, She Wrote's run. He has submitted her book to a publisher, and although at first she's reluctant, she decides to go ahead and allow them to publish it. At first, it is number 6 on the bestseller list, and then it goes to number 2. Jessica is then told that she has to fly to New York to be on various talk shows. Who is bored that she just says, well, I never actually wanted my book to be published. It was just a hobby. Some people like to needlepoint and some people like to paint. I like to write mysteries. And it was my nephew Grady who wanted me to do it, to publish it. And most talk show hosts hate that and try to dig deeper and try to find something about her that might be interesting. She ends up becoming exhausted and wants to go back home. But we're introduced to Preston Giles, played by Arthur Hill, a character actress with over 120 credits to his name. He unfortunately passed away on October 22nd, 2006 at the age of 84. His last known credit is Murder, She Wrote, ironically. He was a very talented actor. In this, he plays Preston Giles, a man that is the owner of the publishing company, and he invites Jessica to a party at his mansion in the country. They go to the country and we get introduced to several characters. Grady's girlfriend, Kit Donovan, played by Jessica Browning. She's not known for a lot of things. She's known for Fresh Horses, Aftermath, and a sitcom called Jessie. She was only in 4 different things, and her last known credit is Fresh Horses, Woman at Engagement Party in 1988. And I can tell you why that happened. We're also introduced to Louise McCollin, the captain's wife. She has been in over 169 things. She unfortunately passed away on January 2nd, 2011 at the age of 80. But she left behind a legacy. Her last credit is Without a Trace. She played Rose Atwood, and she's known for Forbidden Planet from 1956, Bad Day at Black Rock, 1955, The Saturn Bug, 1965, and a television series I've never heard of called Honey West. And we also get introduced to Caleb McCallan, aka Captain McCallan, played by Brian Keith. Another character actor that's been in 165 different things, including the original Parent Trap in 1961, which you can see on Disney+. That is on now. He unfortunately passed away on June 24th, 1997 at the age of 75. But he had a lifelong career. I think he played the father in The Parent Trap. Yeah, he played the father. Interesting. I find this stuff fascinating. And he's skeet shooting. At the party, it's come as your own literary character, and Jessica comes. She says that she's as Cinderella's fairy godmother, but she looks like Glinda from The Wizard of Oz. That's what she looks like to me. And we get introduced to Peter Braille, played by Bert Convy, who was known for hosting game shows, mainly. He did have an acting career. I'm about to look here. Bert Convy was known for The Cannibal Run, Weekend Warriors, The Snoop Sisters, and Hero at Large. He unfortunately passed away on July 15th, 1991 at the age of 57. His last known credit is The Gary Schelling Show in 1990. But like I said, he hosted Match Game, Super Password. He hosted a lot of game shows, and he was a really great actor. He does a lot of singing in this particular episode, and he's really good. We also get introduced to Ashley Vickers, played by Trisha O'Neill. She's still living. She's known for Titanic, where she played Woman, which doesn't tell us much. Star Trek: The Next Generation as Captain Rachel Garrett from 1990 to 93. Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and Airwolf. Her last known credit is Jag as Dr. Beth. She starred in 2 different episodes, and she also guest starred in Beverly Hills 90210 in 1998. So cool. And we also get introduced to Dexter Baxtendale, but he's not that important of a character. But he was played by Dennis Patrick. Dennis is known for the original Dark Shadows as Jason McGuire, The $6 Million Man, The Bionic Woman, and the movie House of Dark Shadows. He starred in 176 different things and passed away on October 13th, 2002. His last known credit is 1994, the movie The Air Up There, and his last television show was Coach, playing Benjamin. And apparently he guest starred in 2 different episodes on Murder, She Wrote. Cool. And I think that's the significant. We also have, as the Chief of Police, Ned Beatty, who is known for, as you probably all know, Superman 1 and 2, Deliverance, and Network. He's been in 166 things, and he's still acting to this day. His latest credit is Baggage Claim from 2013, and he's a character actor as well. And he's one of the few detectives in Murder, She Wrote history that actually lets Mrs. Fletcher help him solve the crime. But anyway, Dexter Baxtondale's the private investigator who comes to the party. Caleb McCallan is dressed as Sherlock Holmes. Preston Giles is dressed as the Count of Monte Cristo, and Ashley Vickers is dressed as the Evil Queen from Snow White. We have a random woman who's not credited, who dressed as Peter Pan, and a guy as Humpty Dumpty, who I don't know who he was. They didn't tell all their names. Louise gets mad and ends up driving home drunk, and eventually the party is a success, except for Grady discovers Dexter Baxtondale in his bedroom snooping. And apparently he was a private investigator hired by Caleb McCallan to fish out someone who was giving false information for his company. The next day, after Jessica is running around, Kitty, in one of the most overacted moments, and probably why she only has 4 credits, I kid you not, basically discovers the body of someone dressed as Sherlock Holmes, who they assume is Caleb McCallan. But it turns out it's not. It's the private investigator. Our suspects are Peter Braille, Ashley Vickers, Preston Giles, and Louise McCallan. And then Beatty comes and realizes that Mrs. Fletcher wrote a book and decides to let her help him solve the crime. At first she doesn't want to solve the crime, but then decides to stay when Grady gets arrested for the crime. Much to her surprise. So she decides to stay to clear him. At one point she thinks that it's Ashley Vickers who killed him, but Ashley has a solid alibi. She spilled wine on her dress, and Mrs. Fletcher helped her get the stain out with some old family recipe that she had. So she had an ironclad alibi. Also, Peter Braille was in the main hall entertaining the guests at the piano. But Miss Fletcher puts 2 and 2 together and realizes that Peter Braille and Ashley Vickers have been conspiring together, taking money from the company to fund his Broadway musical. That's way off Broadway on 37th Street. So eventually Miss Fletcher goes to Caleb McCallan's boat and basically says, you know, the killer could be after you because they were wearing your costume. But he says nonsense, and of course later they find his body dead on the boat. Miss Fletcher finally puts 2 and 2 together, and the murderer is... Dun dun dun! Spoiler alert if you have not seen this episode. Preston Giles, who is a potential love interest for Mrs. Fletcher, and I think this is like the only time this happens. I could be wrong because I haven't seen every episode. But it turns out that Preston Giles was in an investment company that invested in a building that was not constructed very well. He was blamed for 14 people dying in its collapse. He went to jail for 15 years, but escaped before his sentence was up 2 years before. And the private investigator recognized him, and so he killed the private investigator so that the private investigator wouldn't reveal who he was. And he also killed Caleb McCallum to fit in with Mrs. Fletcher's theory that whoever the killer was trying to kill Mr. McCallum. This was a fantastic way to open the show. Angela's acting and the acting of all. We even have a nice little cameo from Herb Edelman, who played the recurring role of Stanley Sobornak on The Golden Girls. So that was nice to see a familiar face. This was a solid pilot episode, and I absolutely love it. And there'll definitely be more episodes to come, because I'm only on disc 4 of Murder, She Wrote, and more episodes will be coming. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed.